Throwaway for obvious reasons. I feel like my entire family has turned against me after I told my brother I'm done being his emergency contact. My parents are calling me selfish, and my brother's telling everyone I abandoned him when he really needed help. Am I the idiot for refusing to keep cleaning up his messes? So I, female, 26, have been dealing with this situation for years, and I think I finally snapped last night. My younger brother Jake, male, 23, has basically been my responsibility since we were kids, even though he's supposed to be the golden child who can do no wrong. When I turned 18, my parents took my entire college fund and gave it to my brother instead. Their reasoning: boys need to be providers, and you're strong enough to figure it out yourself. I shit you not, those were my dad's actual words. My mom just nodded along like this made perfect sense. So while my brother got handed everything for his bright future, I've been working full-time for the past 8 years and doing night classes at community college when I can afford them. I'm still 3 years away from my degree, because every time I save up for classes, something happens, and I end up spending the money on bills or emergencies instead. The worst part? My brother dropped out after 1 semester to become an influencer. He decided college was limiting his creative potential, and he could make more money doing TikTok videos. My parents were pissed privately, but publicly they're still going on about how creative and entrepreneurial he is. Meanwhile, I'm still grinding away trying to get the education they gave him money for. But here's where it gets really frustrating. Ever since my brother moved out 2 years ago, I've been his emergency contact for literally everything. Hospital visits, police calls, apartment issues, you name it. And this kid has an emergency at least once a month, I swear. Last night was the final straw. I get a call at 2 a.m. from some hospital saying they need me to come pick up my brother immediately. I'm thinking he's dying, right? So I throw on clothes and race over there, my heart pounding the whole time. Turns out he's totally fine. Not even a scratch on him. But his car got rear-ended by some drunk driver and it's completely totaled, so he can't drive himself home. The hospital just needed someone to sign paperwork and give him a ride. I spent 3 hours in that damn waiting room dealing with insurance forms and police reports. And while I'm sitting there, I'm counting in my head, this is the 6th emergency in 4 months where I've had to drop everything and rush to help him. There was the time he got food poisoning and needed someone to bring him medicine. The time he locked himself out and had to sleep on my couch. The time he got way too drunk at some party and needed a pickup. It just goes on and on. When we're finally driving back to his place, he's going on and on about how lucky he was that the drunk driver hit him instead of him hitting someone else. I try to bring up the pattern of these emergencies, and he just brushes it off. Says accidents happen, and this one wasn't even his fault, which, okay, fair point about the drunk driver, but what about all the other stuff? He mentioned being stressed about figuring things out, but when I asked what he meant, he just changed the subject and pretended to fall asleep in the passenger seat. He always does this when he doesn't want to talk about something. But here's what really set me off. When we get to his apartment, I help him to the door, and I can see his kitchen counter through the open doorway. There are bills everywhere, like piles of overdue notices and final payment warnings just scattered around. I'm talking electric company, internet, credit cards, stuff I didn't even know he had. I asked him about it, and he got all defensive, quickly shoving the papers into a drawer and saying it's under control. But I could see red text on half those envelopes. Nothing about that looked under control. That's when I lost it. I told him I'm done being his emergency contact, and he needs to find someone else to call when his life falls apart. I said I'm tired of dropping everything to clean up messes that could have been avoided if he just made better decisions. He got really hurt and pissed off. Started saying I was abandoning him when he actually needed help for once. He called me selfish and said I was acting like I'm better than him just because I have a job. I called him irresponsible and said maybe if he spent less time making TikToks and more time paying his bills, he wouldn't need so much help. It escalated pretty badly and I ended up storming out. But now my parents are blowing up my phone saying I'm being cruel to my brother during a difficult time. My mom actually said I should be supporting family instead of keeping score of how much I help him. The thing is, I am keeping score because I've been doing this shit since I was 12 years old. I've been the family crisis manager, the backup parent, the responsible one who has to fix everything. And I'm exhausted. My brother's been texting me saying he can't believe I'd cut him off over one fight and that he thought family was supposed to stick together. But it's not one fight. It's years of this pattern where something goes wrong, I drop everything to help, and then nothing changes. I feel like I'm going crazy because everyone's acting like I'm the villain here. My parents keep asking me about his progress, like I'm supposed to be monitoring his life, but they won't actually do anything to help him themselves. Maybe I should have been nicer about it. I don't know. I was just so frustrated seeing all those overdue bills after spending 3 hours of my night dealing with his car situation. But now I'm wondering if I'm actually being selfish. He did get hit by a drunk driver, which genuinely wasn't his fault. And maybe those bills aren't as bad as they looked. I could be overreacting to something that's temporary. Am I the idiot for telling my brother I'm done being his emergency contact? Should I have handled this differently? Now for the first update. Things got way worse since my last post. And honestly, I'm starting to think you guys were right about my brother being more controlling than I realized. I got a call at work today that made me question literally everything about our relationship. And now I don't know what the hell is going on anymore. So this morning I'm sitting at my desk, trying to focus on this stupid quarterly report when my phone rings. Unknown number, which I normally don't answer, but something made me pick up. It was this guy who said he was my brother's landlord, and he needed to talk to me about the rent situation. I asked what rent situation he was talking about. I don't live with my brother. I don't pay his rent. Why are you calling me? Turns out my brother hasn't paid rent in 2 months. The landlord said when he threatened eviction last week, my brother gave him my number and told him his sister handles the family finances and would cover this month's payment. I swear I almost dropped my phone. I couldn't believe it. I told this guy I never agreed to pay anyone's rent, and I had no idea my brother was even behind on payments. The landlord seemed genuinely surprised and kept apologizing, saying my brother made it sound like it was all arranged. He mentioned my brother seemed really desperate and kept talking about some family money that was coming soon but hadn't arrived yet. I was so pissed I could barely think straight, like using my name without asking, telling his landlord I'd pay his bills. After our huge fight about me being done with his emergencies, I was so mad. I hung up and immediately called my brother. He tried to play dumb at first, saying it was weird, and he wondered how the landlord got my number. But when I told him I was about to call our parents and tell them exactly what was happening, he completely broke down crying. And here's where it gets really messed up. He admitted that he's been completely broke since dropping out 2 years ago. Not just struggling with money, completely broke, and all those emergencies over the past 4 months. The food poisoning where I brought him medicine and groceries, getting too drunk and needing a ride, plus I always gave him gas money, locking himself out, and I bought him dinner after. All fake. Well, not fake exactly, but he would put himself in situations where he knew I'd help, because I always give him gas money or buy food when he's having a crisis. But he was too proud to just ask for money directly. I was so confused I couldn't even understand what he was saying at first. I asked how this was possible. Mom and Dad gave you the college fund. You should have had plenty to get started, even after dropping out. You've been posting on social media about your entrepreneurial journey, and you have that expensive camera equipment. That's when he got really quiet and said, "It's complicated." I kept pushing because nothing was making sense. Like our parents have been bragging to the entire family about how they gave him everything for his education and future. They're always asking me about his progress, but in this weird, vague way. I figured he was just terrible with money, not completely broke. Finally, he admitted that he never actually got the college fund money from our parents. I asked what he meant by that. They said they gave it to you. That's why I've been working full-time and doing community college part-time for 8 years while you got to pursue your dreams. He said the money came with strings attached and conditions he couldn't meet. I felt like the ground shifted under me. For 8 years, I'd believed our parents had handed him my education money while I struggled through community college. But if he never actually got it, then what the hell had I been angry about all this time? When I asked what kind of conditions, he clammed up and said I need to ask them directly because they made him promise not to talk about it. Which is just, what the hell kind of promise is that? The whole conversation was so frustrating because he kept being vague about everything. He'd talk about the pressure they put on him and how it wasn't as simple as I thought, but wouldn't give me actual details. And then he'd circle back to begging me not to tell our parents about the fake emergencies or the landlord situation. I honestly don't know what to think anymore. On one hand, I'm furious that he's been tricking me for months. using my name with his landlord without asking, creating fake emergencies to get me to give him money. That's so messed up. But on the other hand, if he really didn't get the college fund money, then what the hell has been going on? Why have our parents been acting like they sacrificed so much for his education? Why do they keep asking me about his progress like I'm supposed to be monitoring his life? And over this past week, my mom's been calling me with these weird, pointed questions about whether I think my brother is taking advantage of family support. She keeps asking if I think he's really trying to build his career or if he's just coasting, which feels like she's testing me for some reason. I don't know if I should confront my parents about the college fund thing or just stay out of it. Part of me wants to call them right now and demand answers, but my brother seemed genuinely scared when he begged me not to tell them about the landlord call. I keep going back and forth between feeling bad for him. If he really didn't get the money, then he's been struggling this whole time, and being pissed about him tricking me. Like, even if his situation is genuinely difficult, lying to me about emergencies and using my name without permission is just wrong. I ended up telling him I needed time to think about everything, and we haven't talked since. His rent is due in 3 days, and I genuinely don't know if he's going to end up homeless. But I also can't just keep supporting this pattern of lies, right? I feel like I'm missing some huge piece of the puzzle here, and everyone in my family knows something I don't. The way my parents talk about supporting him while he finds his path, the vague questions about his progress, the mysterious conditions on the college fund, something doesn't add up. Maybe I've been the one who's out of the loop this whole time. Maybe there's been some bigger family stuff happening that nobody told me about. Or maybe I'm overthinking this and my brother is just lying to cover up bad financial decisions. I honestly don't know what my next move should be. Do I call my parents and ask directly about the college fund? Do I stay out of it and let my brother figure out his own mess? Do I help with rent one more time while he sorts things out? Everything feels so much more complicated than it did a week ago, when I thought the biggest problem was just setting boundaries with an irresponsible brother. Edit. 1. For people asking if I'm going to help with the rent, I honestly don't know yet. The whole lying thing has me really conflicted about what's actually real versus what's planned. 2. Someone DM'd asking about the conditions on the college fund. I'm planning to call my parents this weekend because something about their story isn't adding up and I need actual answers. Now for the second update. Sorry for the delay. Things have been absolutely chaotic, and I honestly don't even know where to start with everything that happened this weekend. So I took everyone's advice and decided to confront my parents directly about the college fund situation before making any decisions about helping my brother. With my brother's rent due Monday and the landlord situation still unresolved, I knew I couldn't wait any longer to get answers about what was really going on with the college fund. I went over to their house Saturday morning, the day before their big 25th anniversary party, planning to have a calm, mature conversation about money and family stuff. Yeah, that didn't happen. The second I brought up what my brother told me about never actually getting the college fund money, my mom's face just changed. She immediately started going off about how my brother is lying to cover his own failures, and I shouldn't believe anything he says because he's desperate and making up stories. My dad jumped in saying they absolutely gave him the money, and if he's broke now, it's because he pissed it all away on stupid dreams instead of getting an education like we planned. Which, okay, but that contradicted what my brother said about there being conditions attached. So I pushed them about what my brother meant by strings attached and conditions he couldn't meet. That's when things got really weird. My mom got all defensive and said, well, obviously there were expectations about how he'd use the money. She said they told him it was specifically for pre-med courses, and if he wanted to waste his life on social media nonsense, that was his choice, but they weren't going to fund it. I was like, wait, pre-med? Since when was my brother supposed to be pre-med? He's never shown any interest in medicine, ever. He wanted to do communications or marketing or something creative. My dad got really pissy at this point and said my brother chose his path when he dropped out after one semester and lost his right to family support. But then I asked how much of the money they actually gave him for that one semester. More uncomfortable looks between them. Finally, my mom admitted they gave him enough for fall semester tuition and told him he'd get spring semester money if his grades were good, and he stuck with the pre-med track. So I asked what happened to the rest of the money. The original amount they took from my fund was like $23,000. One semester of community college is maybe $2,000. That's when my dad completely lost it and started yelling about how I'm being ungrateful and stirring up family problems instead of focusing on my own life. He said they invested the money wisely and used it for family needs over the years. My mom kept trying to shush him, but he was on a roll. I asked what family needs exactly. We never had any major emergencies or medical bills. Our house is paid off. Both my parents have stable jobs. My mom finally said they needed to plan for retirement, and the money is still in the family. So it's not like they stole it. She said when they retire, they'll probably help both me and my brother more, but right now they need to be responsible with resources. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They took my college money, gave my brother a tiny fraction of it with impossible conditions, then used the rest for their own retirement savings, while telling everyone how generous they were being with his education. And they've been watching me struggle through community college for 8 years, working full-time and taking classes when I can afford them, knowing the whole time that they had the money I was supposed to use, but decided their retirement was more important. I was so angry I couldn't even speak. I just left without saying anything else because I knew if I tried to talk I was going to start screaming. But here's where it gets really messy. The next day was their anniversary party. Extended family, family friends, neighbors, the whole thing. And I spent the entire morning going back and forth about whether to just pretend everything was normal or completely mess everything up. I kept thinking about my brother begging me not to tell our parents about the landlord situation because he was scared of them. And all those times over the years when people would praise my parents at family gatherings for being so generous with my brother's education, while I just smiled and nodded, even though it killed me inside. So I guess I decided to mess everything up. There's this woman, Carol, who works with my mom and has been to like every family party for years. She knows our whole family situation and always talks about how proud she is of my parents for putting family first and making sacrifices for their kids' futures. She also handles payroll at my mom's company, which becomes important later. I went up to Carol when she was chatting with my aunt about family stuff and started going on about how proud I am that my parents were able to help my brother with his education expenses. I was laying it on really thick, talking about what a generous sacrifice it was and how grateful our whole family is that they prioritized his future, even though it meant they had less for themselves. Carol started looking confused because she was doing math in her head. She mentioned knowing what my parents actually make and said the amounts I was talking about seemed really high compared to their income. My aunt jumped in saying, yeah, it was especially generous since I had to get student loans for community college. Carol got this weird look and started asking specific questions about how much money we were talking about and when it was given. I just kept being vague but enthusiastic, saying things like, oh, you know how modest my parents are. They never want to brag about how much they've helped us kids. But Carol wasn't letting it go. She said based on what she knew about their salaries and expenses over the years, having substantial extra money to give away for education seemed unlikely, unless they'd been saving for years specifically for that purpose, which she didn't think was the case since my mom was always talking about money being tight. When Carol kept pushing for specifics, I finally said something like, well, you know how modest my parents are about exact amounts, but it was substantial enough that they couldn't help me too. My aunt started doing math too and realized that if my parents had that much money available for my brother's education, there's no reason I should have needed student loans. My uncle overheard and mentioned how unfair it always seemed that only my brother got help with college expenses. More relatives started gathering around as Carol kept pushing for details about the timeline and amounts. My parents were across the room, but I could see my mom watching our conversation with this panicked expression. Carol finally said something like, she handles the payroll. She knows what my parents make and she knows what they spend on their mortgage and car payments. The numbers I was talking about just didn't add up unless they had a major windfall she didn't know about. That's when my aunt put it together. She asked if maybe my parents had college funds for both me and my brother, but only gave his money to him. I just shrugged and said, oh well, you know how it is with family finances. Everything works out somehow. But Carol wasn't done. She said it sounded like my parents claimed to give away money they didn't actually give away, which meant either they were lying about helping my brother, or they were lying about not being able to help me. The conversation was getting louder, and more people were paying attention. My parents finally came over and my dad immediately started doing damage control, saying people were misunderstanding our family's financial situation. But Carol knows numbers and she wasn't backing down. She asked my dad directly how they managed to have an extra $23,000 for my brother's education on their salary. My dad got defensive and said it was none of her business how they managed their money. My mom tried a different approach, saying they gave my brother some help, but people were exaggerating the amounts. But my aunt was like, wait, so you didn't give him the full college fund? What happened to the rest of it? The whole family was watching now. My uncle asked why I needed student loans if there was college money available. My cousin asked if my parents had been planning to help me too, but changed their minds for some reason. My parents' explanations kept contradicting each other. First, they said they gave my brother all the money. Then they said they only gave him some of it. Then my dad said the money was invested for the family's future, but wouldn't explain what that meant. Finally, my aunt just asked point blank if they took both kids' college funds and used the money for themselves while telling everyone they were being generous with my brother's education. The silence was so awkward. My mom started crying and my dad was turning red. He finally exploded and started yelling at me for humiliating them at their anniversary party and airing private family business in front of everyone. But the damage was done. Everyone could see that my parents had been lying about money for years. They'd let me struggle with student loans while they had my college fund money sitting in their retirement accounts. They'd set my brother up to fail with impossible conditions, then acted like his failure was his fault. The party pretty much ended after that. People started leaving, and my parents were crying and yelling about how I ruined their anniversary and how ungrateful I am after everything they've done for our family. I left before they could really get going, but my phone has been blowing up since yesterday with family members asking for the real story and my parents sending long texts about how disappointed they are in my actions. I don't even know how I feel about any of this. Part of me feels vindicated because the truth is finally out. But part of me feels terrible because I definitely humiliated my parents in front of their friends and family on their anniversary. Maybe I should have handled this privately instead of making it a public thing. But I was just so angry about years of lies and watching my brother and me both struggle while they hoarded money and acted like martyrs. I still don't know what to do about my brother's rent situation. And now my parents are probably never going to speak to me again. My extended family is taking sides, and everyone wants to get involved in family business that's already complicated enough. I feel like I started something huge, and now I don't know how to deal with all the fallout. Edit. Since so many people are asking, yes, my brother knows what happened at the party. He called me yesterday, and honestly seemed more relieved than angry that the truth is finally out. To address the people saying I should have confronted my parents privately first, I did. That's literally what the first half of my post is about. They lied to my face and tried to lie to me about the money situation, even when confronted directly. For those asking if I'm planning to help with his rent now that I know the full situation, I'm honestly not sure yet. The lying about emergencies still bothers me, even though I understand why he felt desperate. We're supposed to talk more this week about everything.